Well, hey, everybody, I'm Jay Privman, the national correspondent with the Daily Racing Form, and thank you for joining us on all of our social media outlets to go through this year's Breeders' Cup. It's the 37th, and I couldn't have a better guest to go through these races with me than Andy Beyer, who I've been friends with for longer than either of us would want to admit, who I've admired for all the years that he has been a working journalist, and certainly for the contributions that he's made to the sport through the speed figures that are the best in the business. Andy, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Well, thank you, Jay. I'm great.
Andy, before we dive into these races and what we're going to do for those of you who are watching, what we obviously with 14 races, it's going to be impossible for us to go through all of them in an hour. So what Andy and I are going to do is go through the ones that we most like in terms of gambles for the weekend. And we'll take those races in chronological order. And whether we take 40 to 45 minutes of the hour, however long it is, at the end, we will have a question and answer portion. So if there's something we haven't covered, if there's a horse that you want us to talk about, that'll be the time when I think we'll be able to best address those things. But Andy, I just wanted to get your perspective on this Breeders' Cup and the quality of the racing this year in a year that's obviously been an extremely difficult and unusual one in a lot of ways.
You know, I mean, with all of the issues created by the pandemic, I thought that American racing has done pretty well under the circumstances, and I think this Breeders' Cup is very good. I mean, it's a good classic with a lot of recognizable stars. We've got two terrific filly matchups. And I think the best group of 2-year-olds that we've seen in the Breeders' Cup in many years. So I'm a little psyched for it.
And also, one thing I was really heartened by was the participation from the Europeans. I had thought that that might understandably be down this year, but it's not. You've got I think a strong group came over from Europe, don't you?
Oh. Yep, I'm as confused by this group as I am every other year.
So, just before we start going into these races, when you're looking at these cards to gamble on, are you looking for win bets, exactas, pick 3, 4, 5 type sequences? What is there anything in particular that you're wanting to find, or do you just
I've been an event like this, I don't try to force myself into one kind of bet. I'll handicap the races and and just see where that leads me. But to me, one of the big issues is dealing with all the Europeans, and there are a lot of circumstances where you say, well, I got to go 7 deep or whatever, and so you might be in those situations. If you're going to bet, you're going to be spreading at a pick 5 or something.
Well, let's dive right into it. The first of the 14 races is on Friday. The Juvenile Turf Sprint will kick things off. And Andy, this is a race that I had flagged as one that I wanted to talk about. The obvious heavy favorite in here is Golden Pal, who's drawn outside in post 14. He's the 8-5 favorite, and he's hard to go against because he's coming off a series of very good races, fast Beyer speed figure in his most recent race. But there was a horse in here who really intrigued me on a turnback play that I'm going to gamble on, and that's number 11, Into the Sunrise, who I thought ran a deceptively good race last time, going 2 turns in the Bourbon at Keeneland, a race that was fast early and set up for horses from behind. The race shape, I think, was very much against a horse with his style that day. And in races like this, I kind of like horses cutting back in distance. He's from the same barn as Golden Pal, that of trainer Wesley Ward. Obviously, on paper, he's not quite as good, but I think the value is there. He's going to be 15 or 20 to 1 in my mind. And his sprints on grass, both of them were good races. And I think he's an attractive gamble in here. What did you think?
I know when you had mentioned that to me, I looked him up, and he's certainly okay. I mean, that win at Woodbine was good. I mean, the winner, the horse who beat him there, came out of it and ran second in a $500,000 race at Kentucky Downs. But I'm still, I'm not courageous enough to go against the favorite here. I mean, but Golden Pal, ran a figure at Saratoga in his last start that's definitely good enough to win this race. And the figure was legitimate. The horse Fauci, he came back and duplicated that figure. I bet it's Wesley Ward. I think Golden Pal is going to be real hard.
So basically, what you're telling me is you like the chalk.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna remind you of what happened, a long time ago at Arlington when you mocked my pick of Dome Driver.
I have frequently been chagrined by mocking your picks.
Well, we'll see how this one turns out, but obviously Into the Sunrise, a play for me, and hoping that he can pull off the upset against his stablemate Golden Pal. Now, the second of the Breeders' Cup races on Friday is the Juvenile Turf. Andy and I both found this race a little bit inscrutable. We'll take maybe a specific question on it at the end, but we want to jump forward right now to the Juvenile Fillies. And Andy was saying at the top of this that he thought the 2-year-old races this year were as strong a group as we've seen. And Andy, obviously, the Juvenile Fillies, though short on numbers, is long on quality. So take me through what you like and don't like.
I've been thinking about this race for weeks, ever since I was watching TVG on September 26th, and the commentators were all denigrating the Beyer speed figures for Princess Noor because they were so low. And of course, everybody who has seen this horse knows how great she is. And as the commentators were saying, one of them said, well, you can just tell by looking at this horse's stride how great she is. And another one, she's probably in the class of ruffian. How could she have figures in the 70s? Then I got an email from Bob Baffert asking how come the figures were so low, and I noticed it was because she ran slow. There was another mile, a 16th race on the day she ran at Santa Anita, and her race was slow in relation to it. This is just a throwout for me, even though she's definitely going to be favorite.
Okay, so that said, who do you like?
Anybody but her. I mean, you've got 3 excellent fillies, particularly. I mean, Day Out of the Office ran a great figure in her win in the Frisette, and Vequist, ran very well, to be second to her. And Simply Ravishing is unbeaten in 3 races with legitimate numbers. I mean, I think there'll be 1, 2, 3 in that order. I mean, just I don't want to see Princess in the frame.
I'm going to have one more question for you, and then I'm going to weigh in on this race. This is a race that's bringing together horses that have already won going 2 turns, like Princess Noor and Simply Ravishing, and horses that are coming out of fast 1-turn mile races, like Day Out of the Office and Vequist. Do you give any preference to maybe Simply Ravishing having gone? We know what you think of Princess Noor.
I think people often overstate that 1-turn and 2-turn things. If you've gone a mile on the 16th, you can go the distance. I'm not swayed by that, but I just think they're all good. And the Frisette was a really strong race. I think those were the 2.
And Simply Ravishing is who we're watching right now with her win in the Alcibiades at the same distance, at the same track as the Juvenile Filly. So obviously she's got the home field advantage. Andy, I really had a tough time with this race because I actually think, even though it's only a 7-horse field, I think there's 4 horses who can win. And while I understand the dismissive nature that you would have over Princess Noor owing to her figs. I'm going to just give you a couple of reasons of food for thought as to why you should maybe just think about including her as a C horse. I didn't pick her, but I do think she's going to run a lot better. And here's why. Her first race was good enough. And then, owing to the schedule that was in California, she had to come back on short rest for the Del Mar Debutante and was trained very lightly into that race to get through it. Same thing happened coming out of that race, going on to the Chandelier. It was a fairly quick turnaround, and she was not trained strongly for those races because of the quick turnaround. She ended up having 3 races in a relatively short amount of time when you compare her to the other horses that she's running against. Now, though, she's had 6 weeks into this race. This is a situation that Baffert is very good at in terms of getting horses trained up to big performances. And I'll tell you this, even though whatever she's done so far, she'll run better than that on Saturday. Whether that's going to be good enough, I don't know. But I know her career top is in the upper 70s. She will run, I'm convinced she will run faster than that on Friday.
Right. I mean, she was obviously winning those races easily. And just on those grounds can move up. But, when horses are going to be favored and are this weak on the numbers, I just have to take a stand. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It happens sometimes, but this is the kind of horse, in my worldview, you have to bet against, or why am I on?
And I'll tell you what, I'm not convinced she's going to be favored. I know she's favored on the morning line, but all of the figs have her slower than.
True.
So I actually don't think she's going to end up being the favorite in the race. So, but be that as it may, we will see how that race plays out. Obviously, though, the depth of quality in that field is quite good. Andy, let's move on to the third race that we wanted to discuss on the Friday card. It's the 4th of the Breeders' Cup races on Friday, and that's the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Always a really intriguing race because you've got horses that are coming over from Europe. You've got horses that are based in the United States. And there's a couple horses here that I was really impressed with their most recent runs, their U.S.-based runs, starting with Aunt Pearl. I really liked her first win at Churchill Downs and really wanted to see how she'd come back in the Jessamine, and I liked her race quite a bit. She's got speed. She finishes off her race well, and I think she's going to be one of the top contenders in a race where you could probably make a case for a number of runners in here. And in addition to her, I really like Plum Ali's race, which we'll take a look at a little bit later. But this is Aunt Pearl. The thing I like about her, Andy, is that she's got good speed, but she can finish off her race as well. What are your thoughts on some of the horses in the Juvenile Fillies Turf?
Well, as usual, I'm confused. But my feeling was that the American horses, figure-wise and otherwise, I just don't think they're that great. And I mean, you have horses in here from Europe who are coming out of kind of real major stakes races. I mean, the Cheverly Park is one of the the premier 2-year-old filly races in England, and I just have an instinct here that the Euros are better than the Americans, and that will be my play.
Are there any in particular that interest you more than any others?
I mean, Miss Amulet, comes out of a very good race. I got a little whisper internationally on Una Data training well, and she has been running against what may be the two best 2-year-old fillies in Europe. The 1 and the 2 are going to be my guesses. I can't pretend to have real conviction here.
So you've got a clocker on standby for you over at the Curragh. Is that what you're telling me?
I have some good European info.
One thing I've found over the years, and regarding this race and regarding the Europeans, I like to take a look at horses that have gone around a turn, obviously a left-handed turn, because I think it's really challenging, Andy, for some of these Europeans who have been running in straightaway sprints to handle a two-turn distance race. I think it's a real tough assignment a lot of times for them. These are tight turning kind of courses, especially at Keeneland. And I think that's just something to weigh when you're looking at these horses. I'm not talking specific about a horse in here, but just in general, when handicapping some of these 2-year-olds that are coming over. There's one horse in here, though, that I want to get a specific thought on you. It's a U.S.-based horse that's had obviously a really good campaign over in Europe, and that's Campanelle. What do you think of her?
I respect Wesley Ward on anything. He's just one of my favorite trainers of all time, and this horse is okay, but he's his specialty is speedy sprinters. So I'm not sure about this one stretching out, but she certainly deserves respect.
And I wonder if she ended up in this race because he's got such a good one. I mean, all of her races have been sprints, but he's got Golden Pal in the sprint, among others. And I wonder if she ended up in here just try and keep two good ones apart.
Undoubtedly.
Let's the other horse, like I said, that I like of the Americans is Plum Ali, who's Christophe Clement's representative in here. I really liked her win. I've liked all of her races so far, Andy, and I think that she, along with On Pearl, are the two best representatives from the U.S. Obviously, if the Europeans jump up and are better than them, then so be it. But I think these two are above average U.S.-based horses for this race. It sounds like
I salute you for having a conviction on this race.
It sounds like you're a little more skeptical of the U.S. horses in here than I am.
But it's not a race where I'm really going to take a stand, despite my good Quran info.
Well, I hope your private clocker at the Cura serves you well. So again, this is Plum Ali's win in her most recent start, the Miss Grillo at Belmont Park, and she, along with On Pearl, are the top two for me in the Juvenile Fillies Turf, which is the fourth of the 5 Breeders' Cup races on Friday. Andy, before we go to the Saturday races, let's just sort of dispense of the Juvenile real quick here. Jackie's Warrior is going to be about the shortest priced favorite of the 14 Breeders' Cup races. Does he stretch out and continue with an unbeaten record, or is he vulnerable?
I think so. I think he's so sufficiently good that going from a mile to 16th is not going to be an obstacle. I don't know about the Kentucky Derby next year. But he's obviously very good. I think the second best horse in this race, figure-wise, is reinvestment risk, and he's over on reinvestment risk. So I think his short price will be just.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about his last race, he, to me, didn't look like he was showing any signs of stress finishing off the mile race. And, sometimes I like to be skeptical of these kind of speed horses stretching out, but his figs are fast, and he finished off that mile race like an extra 16th isn't going to be any bother for him as well. So he's going to be a short price, but he certainly does look like a deserving short price in the Juvenile. And like I said, if you have questions on any of the Friday races or after we get done with the Saturday races, they'll be in the queue, and we'll answer those after we go through the Saturday card, which we are going to turn our attention to now. And Andy, we come out of the blocks with a heck of a race to start the Saturday Breeders' Cup portion. It's the Filly and Mare Sprint. You were alluding earlier to a couple of great matchups among fillies. Obviously, this would be one of them with Serengeti Empress and Gamine. Which way do you see this going?
Well, they're both terrific. I'm a Gamine fan. When she won her two great ones in New York with figures of 108 and 110, the best figure for any 3-year-old. I thought she was maybe another Rachel Alexandra, and I can barely give a filly higher praise than that. I mean, she faltered in the Kentucky Oaks. I thought that was disappointing, and maybe she's just a 7 furlong to 1 mile horse. But I'd love to see her run another big one. She, however, is running up against a rare filly who is quicker than she is, and I mean Serengeti Empress. Her last couple races going 7 furlongs, I mean, were much better than the speed figures would indicate, because she was just in gut-wrenching speed duels and just never gave up. Now, the fact that they are both so fast, you would say, could set the race up for a closer if they get into a huge duel. But I think they're just so innately better than the other horses. I don't know if I bet too much money on that prop.
So, I mean, let's say you're playing a pick 3 or 4 or something like that. Would you just double the race and figure you've got it covered and move on?
No, because I think there's enough of this is not a race that I think I would want to get too involved in on the betting standpoint, because how good they are, but there is that that pace scenario that could open the door for an upset, and if one of them wins, they're going to be like 6-5, 7-5. So I don't see it as a betting race, but just for a watching race, it's as good a good an attraction as we've got all weekend.
Yeah, one thing I found interesting about this race, Andy, was the draw, because I think Serengeti Empress is a faster horse the first quarter mile than Gamine, and I think because of she drawing outside, Serengeti Empress drawing outside, that gives her a little bit of a tactical advantage. It presents a trickier assignment for John Velasquez, who's drawn in post 2. Does he try and go with her early, which I don't know if she can, and if she does, I don't know that it's beneficial for either of them.
Yeah, it's only a field of 7, and and Serengeti's Empress is going to go, and Gamine is going to be chasing. I think that John Velasquez could kind of work it out from there.
But can she catch her if she chases?
I don't think she has a choice.
I understand that, but can she?
Yes, she can. I mean, she's got the figs. I mean, she's proved that she can run 7 furlongs faster than Serengeti Empress, and I hope she does. I'm rooting for her, but this is not a betting situation.
All right, well, let's move on to something that I think is a betting situation for you, the turf sprint. There's a horse in here that you like who's going to be a price, who had a trip a few starts back. Why don't you take it away?
Well, this is quite a weak race for the turf sprint. I mean, in recent years, we've seen some real fast turf sprinters running big figures. I mean, there was a Stormy Liberal a couple of years ago ran a figure of 119 in this race, and now we've got a field that can barely crack 100. So maybe it's a race that does open itself up for a surprise. And the other thing that's odd here is for a field of 14 going 5.5 furlongs, there's not a lot of speed, which you would normally expect. And so I mean, maybe this is crazy, but I thought that just might be able to get the lead in here. Leinster, pressed her in their last meeting, and so I think Leinster's going to be right up there. But going to use those two horses, and and just hope that the speed holds. I mean,
And you thought in this video we're showing, you thought Just Might had some traffic trouble in this race, right?
Yeah, I mean she was in a race with the leader. It's a fast Wesley Ward horse named Bound for Nowhere, and the trouble wasn't dramatic, but she was kind of tight on the rail, and just didn't have the easiest of trips, and wasn't that badly beaten. I just think if she gets loose in here, could be a very big price.
Well, for him to get loose in here, he's going to have to outrun the horse just to his inside.
I'm sorry, I was saying she.
Right.
He was done with Benders.
Going to have to outrun the horse just to his inside, Big Runner. And I guess you haven't been out here for a while, because you seem to have forgotten the difference between California speed and other.
I guess so.
But I think Big Runner's. I agree with you that this race didn't come up with as much pace as you would expect for a sprint, but I think Big Runner's got a chance to outquick your horse early. And if he does, I think he could be very, very tough in here. The other aspect of this, though, is that, they could duel each other into submission, and then it's just, Katie bar the door as they come down the stretch with all the late runners.
Right. I was just a little prejudiced there, or a little dubious about Big Runner, because those 5.5 furlong races, Santa Anita, there were a lot of timing errors in those races where the first quarter fractions were totally unbelievable. So, maybe I, dismissed that 21.28 more red than I should have.
All right, let's move on to the Dirt Mile, which is the next race on Saturday. And for me, Andy, this is one of the races that I'm most looking forward to from a gambling standpoint. I really like Nick's Go in here. I thought his race last time at Keeneland was terrific. He gets to come back at the track at which he just ran a giant figure, a giant Beyer figure, in fact. It
could have been higher.
Wow, that makes me like him even more. Obviously, Complexity is an extremely talented horse. He did run poorly his 1-2 turn time, but he had a legit excuse that day. He bucked his shins. That said, I'm still not sure he wants 2 turns. And I am sure that Nick's Go can get 2 turns, as we saw in this race that we're watching that he won most recently. I think he's really live in here. Who do you like?
Well, he's got the fig, and, Brad Cox is just seems to win everything in sight. You've got to respect almost any horse he puts on the track. I thought that while I certainly respect him and have to use him, I was very interested in Sharp Samurai.
Yep.
In this race. It's kind of a funny horse. He broke his maiden on the dirt by like 8 or 9 lengths, and then was switched to the turf for much of his career until he showed up in the Pacific Classic at going 1.25 miles, which is farther than he's ever indicated he wants to go. And he ran well. He got a figure of 103, which will put him here with. Put him in contention here with, just about anybody else, unless Nick's Go runs, the lights out again. I think he's a very live horse and kind of covered up.
I agree with you. I picked him second in my Racing Form picks behind Nick's Go. You and I seem to have very similar thoughts in this race. I thought his race here in the Pacific Classic was outstanding. It was. Not only was he running against maximum security, he was running at a distance that I think is a little bit beyond optimum for him, going out to 1.25 miles.
Oh,
he's much better at a mile.
Even anything beyond 1 mile seemed to be suboptimal for him. So for him to do that on the dirt, I think he's a real strong strong contender here.
Yeah, me too. If it's a Nixco Sharp Samurai 1-2 or 2-1, Andy and I will both do quite well in this race. Andy, let's move on to the filly and mare turf race. That's the next one in sequence in here, and a real nice field here of horses coming over from Europe. A lot of well-known U.S.-based runners, including Sister Charlie, who won this race 2 years ago. You've also got the morning line favorite Rushing Fall, who's 5 for 6 lifetime at Keeneland and won the Juvenile Fillies turf 3 years ago. It's a high-class field in here. I really like Rushing Fall. I really liked her last race, running down Mean Mary, who I have a lot of respect for as well. For me, from a gambling standpoint in this race, I like Rushing Fall best, and I'm going to try and get a couple of the Europeans underneath her in the gimmicks, those being Terabellum and Peaceful, who I think were compromised by soft, bottomless kind of ground in their last starts, and they're going to appreciate a firmer type of course that I think they're going to get on Saturday. What are your thoughts on this race?
We're so used to seeing Chad Brown dominate, almost every turf race run in the East. And so that when he's got, 2 or 3, live runners, you kind of assume he's going to win. But I'm just wary of him in this race. I mean, Sister Charlie, great as she was in her best races, hasn't won a race for a year. And I did not share your enthusiasm for Rushing Fall's last race. You got a field of 5, slow pace, the two speeds go 1-2 around the track and a moderate figure. I don't want her. I just have a feeling that a Euro is going to hop up and beat Chad this time. I thought that the Terabellum was a live horse in here. I mean, she 3 races back, she ran a good race against males, narrowly losing to Circus Maximus, who was elsewhere on the card. And the Cayenne Pepper, the 14 horse, looked okay to me, and Audaria. I'm going to spread around with the Euros and as usual, get beat by Chad.
Well, we both do think there are Europeans here who are capable. I just have a higher opinion, obviously, of Rushing Fall than certainly it looks like you do in this race. Regardless, it'll be. It looks like it's going to be a terrific race. I think it's a very good field. I think that we were talking about how some of these fields look like they're maybe not as good as what we've seen in the past for those kinds of races. Yeah. But I think this is a pretty good field for the filly and mare turf.
Right.
Andy, let's jump ahead. We're gonna skip the sprint right now. Which, by the way, if you haven't heard, Vekoma is out of this race. He was the morning line favorite, and that'll unfortunately depress the price on other horses that were capable of beating Vekoma if you were going to play against Vekoma. But we're going to move on now to the Breeders' Cup Mile on turf. There's a scratch out of this race, number 9. One Master was withdrawn this morning. That'll allow the 15 Order of Australia to get in from the also eligible list. And Andy, here's a race where I kind of look at this race like you did the filly and mare turf. I'm not crazy about the U.S.-based horses that are milers this year. And I was looking at the Europeans, and I ended up settling on Safe Voyage, who's a 15-1 on the morning line. The thing I like about Safe Voyage is he's banged out a series of strong races this year, likes firm ground, but as I was alluding to earlier, one of the things I like to look at with European horses coming over here, his races on left-handed courses are excellent. And I think in a race where there's the potential for chaos, this is a horse that potentially could be a decent gamble in here. Who do you like?
Well, just one word about Safe Voyage. I mean, the best, I guess the best race in his best race in the form was his last one, winning a grade 1 at long shot, or losing by a neck in a grade 1 at long shot. But that was a day when I guess that was arc day, and the course was an absolute bog, and I'm always wary of horses' form on those real deep your courses. But they said that I'm going with the Americans in this race. The best Beyer speed figure on the turf all year was the race won by Factor This at Pimlico on Preakness Day, and the figure of 110 was absolutely correct. I mean, it could have been. There was a grade 3 race for older fillies and mares, with some good solid runners in there, and he ran 3 full seconds faster than they did, and so the 110 was legitimate. His previous start, he got beat by Digital Age, and that was also a good solid race. I'm going to use those 2 horses that try to beat the Euros, but Factor This is a legit price. I gotta stick with the Beyer speed figure.
I understand why you want to stick with the figures on him, but help me understand why Safe Voyage's race on soft ground is discounted by you, and yet a 110 earned on bottomless ground is okay.
Well, I thought that Factor This ran quite well with a decent pace in the race at Churchill Downs. So I didn't consider it a total fluke. I mean, I realize that soft turf is always iffy, but when I got that 110 staring me in the face, I know what I've got to do.
Well, we'll wish you best of luck with Factor This. Andy, we're going to do the classic in a second, but just from another race, from just an interest standpoint, we were talking about the great head-to-head matchups there are on this Breeders' Cup weekend, and obviously the Distaff is one of those, with Monomoy Girl going up against Swiss Skydiver. Do you have a preference, or is this another one where just use both of them and move on?
I lean towards Swiss Skydiver. I mean, that Preakness was a great race.
Yeah.
And that, she's a 3-year-old. She's in peak form, and there's no reason she can't step up further. I mean, Monomoy Girl is at the end of her 5-year-old season. They lay off in the middle. I don't know if there's any upside for her from what you see on the form. Obviously, her normal races, she's just a paragon of consistency. You've got to respect her. I just love that race that Swiss Skydiver ran by.
Yeah, it really was one of the highlights of this racing year, was that Preakness Stakes with her beating Authentic. Well, speaking of Authentic, he and Tiz the Law are the 3-year-olds going up against a good group of older horses, and what I think is one of the best classics we've had in a long time, Andy. I think the quality of this field is terrific. You've got horses like Improbable and Maximum Security and Tom's de Tot. This was one of the races you wanted to talk about, so the floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, it's I think for a TV audience, general interest TV audience, it's great because you've got recognizable horses, from the Triple Crown series who are major contenders in here. I think they'll probably maybe take more money in some cases than they deserve. Whereas Tom's Day Pop, doesn't have that triple crown glamour around him. But gee, he is a really good horse, and he won. He won 4 races in a row before the Whitney at Saratoga, and then just had a disastrous trip. Breaking like 3 or 4 lengths behind the field, getting caught behind a slow pace, and with all of that, he only lost by a couple of lengths to Improbable. I just think with a decent trip, he can turn the tables on Improbable, whom I definitely respect, and beat everybody else.
No, I agree with you. I think Tom's Tatat is definitely one of the win candidates in here. I like the 3 older horses in here: Tom's Tatat, Improbable, and Maximum Security. That's not the order I ranked them in, though. I have Improbable on top. I just think this horse, Andy, is a lot better than he was as a 3-year-old. He's banged out 3 straight Grade 1 wins, all with strong Beyer speed figures in all of those performances, including that win in the Whitney, which I'll admit, he benefited from a good trip that in a race where both Tom's Tatat and even by my standards were compromised by the way they broke. And then last time, Improbable got a nice setup in the Awesome again, when there was a hot pace in front of him and he sat back and then finished the race off. But a couple of things I like about him: I think he's, like I said before, I think he's a better horse than he was a year ago. I think he's a versatile horse. I think he can sit back and blast home. And I think if he can sit close and stalk and finish off his race as well. His works since his last race have been sensational. He's just been a really strong working horse all year. And I ranked him first in here. But I'll tell you what, I think Maximum Security is capable of a bounce back effort in here. I don't think he liked the Santa Anita track the way it was on the day of the Awesome again. It was a much deeper surface than it has been as that meet progressed. He's a fighter when he gets into a dogfight, and he fought on for second in that race. He certainly wasn't going to beat a stablemate that day, but I think he's capable of bouncing back with a better effort. And the thing that I found really interesting about him, Andy, is that I've seen him a lot with his training at Del Mar and then at Santa Anita. And he's just, most of the time, he's been a horse that you've got to push along in his works. He just seems like he goes through the motions. But coming out of the Awesome again, he has really stepped his game up. And I think he's moving forward towards a big performance. And I respect the horse you picked a lot. He's a really, really good horse. And it makes this, to me, one of the more challenging races to gamble on, but one of the most anticipated races to watch.
We have to root against Maximum Security. This is a horse. Now, he's in the hands of Bob Baffert. Maybe we just disregard the previous races of his career, but this was a horse who was running on some of the most high-powered illegal drugs in the history of horse racing, and it was part of a horrible racing scandal, and I don't want to see him be the poster boy for American racing. So no Maximum Security for me.
Very well. Let's talk about the 2 3-year-olds, Authentic and Tis the Law. Your thoughts on their chances going up against the big boys?
I think they're both very good. Their figures are fit with everybody else. 3-year-olds late in the year, this is the time a lot of them, blossom and really take a big step forward. Maximum Security certainly, looks like a natural 1.25 mile horse. He's got that, that great kick. I respect him, and I, always. I'm sorry, Tis the Law.
Right.
I always respect him, and I always, have great respect for Barclay Tagg. So, he's definitely a contender. But I just, as I say, I just think that Tom's Tatat will be a little bit of an under the radar horse here.
Yeah, I think these are above average 3-year-olds. It's nice to see both the Derby and the Belmont winner running in this race. That said, I think this is an exceptional group of older horses, and I think the 3-year-olds are going to really have to step their game up to a level that we haven't seen yet. And maybe they can do it, but they're going to have to do it in order to beat these. The other thing, though, about specific to Tis the Law, though, Andy, is having watched a lot of his races, he's always been ridden with the intent of wanting to be outside horses. And I really don't see how he's going to get a comfortable trip from where he ended up being drawn. He's going to have to try and get out at some point, and there's some really good horses drawn to his outside. And it just seems to me like it's going to be a challenging trip for him to get to the position he needs to get in to run to his best. And I, hats off to him if he wins. If he wins, he's not only 3-year-old champ, but he's horse of the year in my book for all that he's accomplished. But I think it's a tough task from where he's drawn. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I can't, I'm not as obsessive as many people are about horses getting stuck on the rail. I mean, that's why we pay jockeys to steer the horses. We in the old days we never said, "Gee, what will Angel Cordero do being in the one post?" I think modern day racing fans have become a little overly obsessed about getting stuck down inside.
I think it just depends on the situation, and this horse specifically just acts to me like he prefers being out there. So we'll see how it goes. Well, anyway, that's Andy and I's thoughts on the races that we most were interested in, either from a fan standpoint and obviously from a gambling standpoint. In the time that we have left, we're now going to open it up for the questions that you've been submitting on all our social media channels. So as they come up, we'll see what they say. The first one is from Pamela Clark, who wants to know if we have any long shot picks. We've given out quite a few so far. Andy?
Well, my 30-1 lone speed on the turf, I think qualifies as a long shot by anybody's standards.
I would say, yes, Just Might for you, and also Sharp Samurai is certainly a long shot for me. Long shots would be into the Sunrise in the turf sprint, and then the horse that I like in the mile grass race to me would be a long shot. That being Safe Voyage. So those would be the ones that
one more word about Samurai. I mean, yes, it may qualify as a long shot, but a lot of times when we talk about long shots, like my turf horse, it's somebody you're reaching for at a price. I mean, Sharp Samurai has real solid dope, and he's just a horse that the public is going to overlook, I think, for the wrong reason.
Very well. Who's next in the queue? Our next one is from how do we see the sprint race? All right, that's a good question, because that's a race that we skipped over. Andy, let's address that.
My answer is going to be not very clearly. Why don't you start?
Well, I was very much against Vekoma. I just had bad vibes on this horse, and I've got to be honest. I'm disappointed he's out, because he was going to take money, and I thought he was beatable. I like the horse. He's a neat horse, and I'm sorry that he's not competing for his connections. But that said, you have to be dispassionate when it comes to gambling, and I was looking forward to gambling against him because I thought he was going to take money, and I just didn't like what's gone on with him over the last 4 months.
Yeah.
This race, Andy, to me, we've been talking about how, like in the turf sprint, there's not a lot of real blast out of the gate speed, and I see this kind of the same way, and I think both Yalpan and the filly Frank's Rocket are going to be very, very prominent in here and have a chance to, lead from start to finish, maybe even 1-2 the whole way around there, because I don't think they're going to need to go, 21 and change to get to the top.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, I just didn't know here.
Fair.
I thought that Feren's Fire, has run a lot of pretty creditable races in his career, and he certainly got speed. Whitmore hasn't been that great recently, but this horse has got a lot of good races in his career. And whenever Ron Moquette is one of those trainers that when I'm looking the other way, always seems to win in my face. So I respect him, but there's just, no horse who with a real edge and quality over the field. It's too tough for me.
Regarding Firenze Fire, one of the things that concerns me about him is I just think he's a lot better at Belmont Park than anywhere else. Is that something that entered into your?
It could be. I'm not trying to cut this too fine here.
Right. In other words, it's an inscrutable race for you.
Yes.
All right, let's move on. What's the next question in the queue? Frank wants to know complexity in the dirt mile. Drew post 10. Do we think his post is a disadvantage considering the close turn? Andy, why don't you lead off with that, and I'll fill in.
I mean, complexity ran a real big figure last time, and post position or not, I'm against him. I thought that he had just the perfect setup as a field of 4 with kind of no pace in the race. He had just the softest trip, that you could have, and he's not going to get any passes in here. So I think I'm going to take a little position against him.
And Frank, I think that post is not. It's obviously not where you'd probably want to be with him. But my bigger concern is can he handle 2 turns? Obviously, the one time he tried 2 turns was poor, but he had a legitimate excuse. He bucked his shins in that race, and he was off a long time after that. But that said, I think there are some quality 2-turn horses in here, as Andy and I alluded to earlier. We both give Sharp Samurai a big chance in here. We both think Nick's Go has a big chance in here. And, with the questions for me regarding complexity being able to do this, combined with what his price is going to be, that doesn't add up to an appealing gamble for me. And if he beats me, hats off to him. But from a gambling standpoint, I'm with Andy. I've got to try and beat him if he's going to be the favorite in here. Our next question in the queue is from hopefully someone. MKC says, what about Kamiko in the mile grass race with the huge time form? Andy, you said that in the mile grass race, you thought the Americans were prominent in here. What did you have any thought on this?
I didn't have a feel for this horse, but I was looking at like a big international betting site, and Kamiko was the favorite. I really couldn't see it on paper, but I bow to the international wise guys over my own study.
Well, let me tell you why I was or at least took a skeptical view of him. While he's run some races over there that are terrific, it looked to me like his absolute best races are on a straightaway at Newmarket, and I just wonder if he's going to run as well, having to go around 2 bends at Keeneland. It's a completely different kind of race than what his best success has been at overseas. And that was one of the reasons I was going to try and oppose him here. I will say this, he couldn't have gotten a better draw. I like, a horse like this being down inside where he can save ground and then go on. But that was my concern with him, Andy.
Yeah, I as I say, when I'm looking at the form, I don't get it. I don't understand, why he's viewed as the favorite, but I'm usually wrong in these things.
Well, both you and I are going to be against him, and if he beats us, if he wins, we lose. Let's see if we've got another question in the queue. Rich wants to know the best long shot bet. This is more of an opinion than a question. He says, March to the Arch in the dirt mile. He's actually in the mile grass race, so please make sure you wager on him in the correct race. Hear you now and believe you later. Duly noted. Moving on. Any thoughts on Tacitus underneath in the Classic?
Well, the fact that you say underneath in the Classic, the indictment that we know that Tacitus never wins, and he has certainly not shown that he can overcome his losing ways against company like this.
Yeah, he just has always promised a lot more than he's delivered. He's had a strong fan base for a long time, Andy, but I get the feeling that that caravan has been emptying out, especially after he got beat last time in the Jockey Club Gold Cup against horses that are certainly inferior to what he's going up against on Saturday. So you and I are both the underneath is, well, how far down? Because for us, certainly not in the win candidate. We've only got time for a couple more questions, and then we're going to move on. And Rich writes back that he was multitasking and stands corrected. Rich, all we want is for you to make sure that you bet March to the Arch in the correct race. So hopefully you will do that. Our last question is from Stephen Testa, who wants to know if Swiss Skydiver could bounce off that monster effort in the Preakness. Andy, I'll take this first and then let you have the last word. I've been waiting for her to bounce all year. I thought that she was going to bounce coming into the Preakness. She's had such an ambitious campaign, and I thought, all right, the Preakness is going to finally be it for her. And she just keeps running big race after big race and after big race. And so I understand that sentiment because I've had it myself for her in previous races, but I'm not there anymore. She's to me made of iron.
I'm not a big believer in the bounce theory to begin with, and she just, she just runs well every time. So I'm with you. I think she'll fire again.
I'm told we've got one more question that came in, Andy. So let's take this, and then we have to go. How many track records get beat? I say 2. Well, okay. We'll see. We can't. There's no wagering on it, so I just not something that given much thought to. Andy, have you?
Well, not being able to see how fast the Keeneland track is going to be makes it a little tough to make a judgment at this stage. But I would say 0 would be my off the cuff guess.
Well, we really appreciate all of you tuning in and watching this. Obviously, we're hoping that you have great success this weekend with the Breeders' Cup races on Friday and Saturday at Keeneland. Make sure you have fully funded your DRF Bets account prior to the races starting on Friday. And once again, thank you for joining us. For Andy Beyer, Andy, really appreciate you taking the time.
It was great fun, Jay.
For Andy, I'm Jay Privman.